try to hit on the big points today that could potentially help folks think about their emission profiles. But before I do that, I'd like to start with I'd like to say that the world needs fossil fuels to continue to meet the growing energy demand. And today, 80% of that is still fossil fuel driven. We're probably at around 300 million barrels of oil equivalent per day in primary energy consumption globally. And that consumption is continuing to grow. Now, how it grows regionally differs. If we look at the US, we're displacing coal by natural gas, thanks to everybody here, and the shale gas revolution. And we'll look at regions like China that are filling that same expansion growth with coal. And 80% of US energy demand could be met by the amount of coal being burned in China. And that's going to continue to grow. When we think about the per capita consumption of energy in China, it's at about 17 BOE. Same in the US is about 50 per person per year. About 23 in the EU and 5 in India. So India just reached where China was 30 years ago. And they're going to look to quadruple that to have the same energy security and economic well-being that comes from that. And as demand grows, the global emissions reached the record of the recent years at 50 gigatons. 70% of that is energy related. So all energy sectors are in the spotlight. That's why we're here today talking about ESG. Now, like I've heard a few speakers speak today, capital will be available to folks that are excelling in these categories and can show in a transparent way that they're reducing their emissions. And today we'll talk about a few sectors there, but I think in terms of the resource, the US is a rich place to be. It's a great place to be for low carbon crude and low carbon natural gas. Now, the prioritization should be around the operators that are the lowest emitters. Let's look at the data here in the States. Now, this is based on the EPA, and we'll just trust this data for a second. 80% of the US onshore production is being reported to the EPA. The 20% are not reporting for two key reasons. They're under the reporting threshold, or they don't know they should be reporting. And I know at least a half dozen companies in that category, just looking at the data over the past couple of years. The emissions related to upstream oil and gas have been rising in correlation with growing production and peaking at about 120 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent in 2019. And we took a dip in 2020. And looking at the relative emissions, we're at about 14, 13 kilograms per BOE. And again, took a dip in 2011 to about 11, 2020 to about 11. And that's all emissions over all production. If we average the operators, then the number's at about 30 kilograms, which is quite a bit higher. And there are 6 key categories that contribute to this data, to these emissions. Now, over the course of the last year, obviously, we've had less drilling and completion activity going, so combustion naturally came down, but not in direct correlation, because most of that is actually the fuel gas that we use to power our base operations. Flaring came down quite a bit, and 2021 is going to look even better. We've seen the data, we're monitoring the data on state level, and the data is looking good. And there's been great progress actually done on the natural gas pneumatic devices side, so all of the efforts that are being put forward are starting to bear fruit, which is fantastic. But looking at those 6 categories that make up over 9%, I break up the combustion category into 2. Fuel gas, which is used mostly to power our base operations, and then diesel, which is used mostly for drilling and completion activities. If we take fuel gas as a separate category, that accounts for a quarter of all of the emissions in the States. And that makes a very compelling case for continued oilfield electrification where possible. Because by doing that, we can up to double the fuel efficiency of that gas or other resource that's going to provide that power. The second category is natural gas pneumatic devices, and I'm sure everybody here has a priority list of the devices they're going to replace, and I'm only half-jokingly saying that. A lot of efforts have been put into replacing those low-bleed devices, new generation devices, and progress is starting to bear fruit. 3 is flaring. Bottom line, there should be no flaring apart from safe oil field operations. And there's still operators that are flaring at high intensities in basins like the Permian, where takeaway has been in a much better place over the past couple of years, and that just speaks to, frankly, inefficient planning of development in those cases. Diesel is number 4. We can do much in that category, but there are limitations. E-fleets, gas-powered, dual fuel, all of those are great options, only if you can achieve way over 90% reliability using those fleets. And there have been some horror stories in that regard, but overall, that's a great way to lower that emission category rate at 10 to 15%. Atmospheric storage tanks, bottom line, VRs are a must, vapor recovery systems. And equipment leaks, our friends at both Kairos and Project Canary spoke to that today. Regular surveys are a great way to take care of the smaller leaks that are persistent. Continuous monitoring, in my opinion, is great to find those big leaks and spend minutes or hours eliminating those versus days or weeks. Now, I'd like to spend a couple of minutes that I have left here to show a quick case study in the Permian Basin. We've taken a range of producers between 25 and 100,000 BOE per day. We've hidden their names, not to pick on anyone in particular. And let's just look at, say, Company C. Now look at that range. Kind of down the middle at 14 to 15 BOE per day, 15 to 14 kilograms per BOE emissions-wise. But that range, there's a half order of magnitude difference between the leaderboard and the laggard. Now it looks like this company has been doing fairly consistent performance over the past several years. And I've looked forward into their state data. They've made some progress in 2021 as well. But we'll look at 2018, atmospheric tanks, the biggest problem. In 2020, over 55% of the emissions were attributed to flaring. And in 2021, they'll probably achieve 11 to 10 kilograms per BOE. If it wasn't for their extra use of fuel gas, they'd actually be in the single digits, and that's where the industry should be. And I'm curious to spend a couple of minutes to talk about those companies I, B, and E in the leaderboard in those single digits, where we all should be, how they got there. And they've actually done very simple things. If we look at their performance over the several years past, and we'll disregard 2015 for a second, and just look at what they've done 2019 to 2020, they've lowered their relative and absolute emissions by exactly half. And they've done that by reducing their flaring by over 70%. Now look, they're still flaring a lot of gas, but relative to Company C, a very small amount. And their combustion has come down. Now, if it was electrification, that could have been a sustained lowering of that emission profile. Unfortunately, it wasn't. They checked. So next year, 2 of the 3 companies are probably going to be outside of this leader group. But one of them is continuing to improve their performance. So it's very difficult to keep performance at high, in the top 10 group or top quartile group. It takes focus every year to achieve that all across the operations. Now these are big, high-level numbers, of course. There's a lot of detail that goes into every single category. So just to finalize the key takeaways, we're going to see fossil fuels, and we're going to see more of them over the years. That's our opinion here, and the importance of ESG is not going to go away either. So the winners are going to be the companies that can figure out how to sustainably reduce their emissions. I think the first step is to get into those single digits, and that's going to open up a world of opportunity. And at ESG-Dynamics, we help with all of those things and the metrics. We help folks figure out strategies around reducing their emissions, and we monitor data, both state and federal. Thank you for your attention.